Language is not just communication. It is creation. It is the architecture of thought. And if they can control your words, they can control your world. Every word you speak is a contract, a vibration cast into reality, a spell, literally. That's why we say we spell words, because to speak is to shape. But here's what they never told you. Most of the language you use was given to you by your captors. Words designed not to liberate, but to limit. Look at how they twist truth with terminology. A man who protects his family is called aggressive. A woman who wants discipline in her child is abusive. A nation that defends its sovereignty is dangerous. A person who questions the narrative is labeled extreme, toxic, or crazy. See how it works? They swap meanings like masks. They use euphemisms to numb your conscience. They call censorship safety. They call indoctrination education. They call obedience morality. And while you parrot their words, you reinforce their worldview, because every time you speak their language, you reaffirm their control over your reality. This is more than semantics. It's mental engineering. They've trained you to talk like a slave, to apologize for truth, to soften your voice, to dilute your intent, to replace "I will" with "I hope," to replace "I am" with "I feel." And what happens to a generation of men who no longer speak from the gut, but from the script? They forget who they are. But here's your weapon. Reclaim your tongue. Speak like a builder. Speak like a commander. Speak like a man who understands the gravity of his words. Say no when it's unpopular. Say yes when it demands risk. Say "I don't know" when truth requires humility. Say "I am" when you mean to become. Your voice was never meant to echo trends. It was meant to summon storms. You want to reshape your life? Start by reshaping your language, because when a man reclaims his words, he reclaims his authority. This is not just a war of politics, not just media, not just economics. This is spiritual warfare, waged not on your body, but on your essence. They don't want to kill you. They want to disconnect you from your purpose, from your will, from your creator. Because a man connected to the divine cannot be ruled. A man whose identity is forged in spirit cannot be manipulated by culture, currency, or fear. So they offer you substitutes, false gods, fake purpose, digital dopamine instead of divine direction. They tell you that spirituality is weakness, that faith is outdated, that God is a superstition. And then they hand you idols, celebrities, billionaires, algorithms, things to worship, people to envy, systems to obey. It's not accidental, it's ritualistic, and they've inverted the sacred. Sex has become soulless. Language has become diluted. Prayer has become parody. And what once connected man to meaning is now mocked. Because the man who kneels in silence, not to an institution, but to the source that forged him, is untouchable. They can cancel your platform. They can collapse your economy. They can twist the world upside down, but they can't reach your soul if it's no longer for sale. So here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. You were born for more than survival, more than sex, success, or social acceptance. You were born with a spiritual signature, a unique assignment written into your DNA. But you've been bombarded with static, noise, lies. So that voice inside you, that sacred compass, becomes faint, becomes foreign. Until one day you forget it ever existed. But it's still there. It's why you're watching this now. It's why your heart beats faster when you hear truth. It's why the matrix can't fully seduce you. Because something inside you remembers, and that memory is power. You're not here to follow a script. You're here to break spells, burn idols, and walk with fire. Symbols are the oldest language in the world, older than empires, older than words, and they speak directly to your subconscious, bypassing logic and rewriting reality beneath awareness. Look around you. You think you're just seeing logos, signs, and shapes? No, you're walking through a spellbook. Because the elite don't communicate in speeches. They speak in geometry, in color, in placement, in repetition. The pyramid, the eye, the serpent, the hexagon. You've seen them your entire life, on money, on buildings, in churches, in movies, and every time you see them, your nervous system whispers, "This means power." You didn't choose that association. It was installed. Why? Because if they can control the symbols that define truth, they can shape the terrain of your mind, make you feel small without ever saying it, make you obey without ever ordering it. Let me show you what's hiding in plain sight. The all-seeing eye? It's not just decoration on the dollar, it's the symbol of total surveillance placed on your currency to remind you every move you make is being watched by forces you'll never touch. Obelisks in capital cities, not just monuments, they're ancient phallic symbols from Egypt, once used to channel spiritual energy toward the ruling class. Why are they in Washington, London, the Vatican? Because the game never ended. The players just changed costumes. Even the corporate world plays the game. Ever wondered why so many logos use circles with slashes, triangles, or interlocking shapes? These aren't random. They're derived from sigils, ritual marks designed to embed ideas into your subconscious. And when these symbols are paired with emotion, fear, lust, nostalgia, they lock in deep programming. So the next time you see that familiar golden arch, you're not just hungry, you're triggered. That's the game, symbolic saturation. Keep you spell-bound, so you never remember you were meant to create, not consume, to command, not conform. But once you see the symbols, you can break the spell, because awareness collapses control. You were taught history in fragments, neatly packaged, sanitized, linear, kings, wars, treaties, progress. But the truth is far darker. History is not a timeline, it's a theater. And behind the curtain, hidden from the stage, sit the directors. Men you've never heard of, families without faces, legacies carved not in stone, but in blood. There is an elite, ancient, strategic, interwoven through finance, religion, and war, that has ruled for centuries without ever being seen. You think the world is chaotic? Random? No. It's choreographed, the great wars, profitable resets, the economic collapses, controlled demolitions, even revolutions, often funded by the very men they claim to fight. You've heard of Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgan. But they were just front men, visible hands to distract you from the invisible architects. They don't run for office, they don't post online, they don't shout, they whisper. And with those whispers, they shape markets, ignite fear, choose presidents, crash currencies, and keep billions of men like you distracted, divided, drained. Their greatest weapon? Perception management. If they control what you believe is possible, they never need to chain your body, because your mind becomes the prison. They created left and right to keep you arguing. They created race wars to keep you distracted. They created debt to keep you enslaved. All while they build kingdoms in silence, untouched, unquestioned, unstoppable. But here's what they never planned for: the return of the aware man. The man who doesn't buy the headlines, the man who tracks patterns, not politics. The man who asks, who benefits from my fear? That man is a threat. Not because he riots, but because he sees. You want to break their spell, then question everything you were told was normal, because in their world, normal means obedient. And you're You're not here to kneel, you're here to rise, with eyes open and fire in your veins. They promised you safety. They wrapped it in soft language, comfort, stability, peace of mind. But behind the velvet curtain of safety is a cage. Because comfort is the most seductive prison ever built. No bars, no chains, just padded walls and predictable days. A steady paycheck, a health plan, an app that delivers dopamine every 10 seconds. You're not shackled, you're sedated. And that's the genius of it. They don't need to use fear anymore. They use comfort addiction. You're told to choose the safe path, get a good job, buy a modest house, stay out of trouble, retire slowly. But let me ask you this, who benefits when you play small? Who profits when you stay silent? Who rules when you fear risk more than regret? Because the truth is this, every man who ever changed the world was told he was reckless. Every man who ever broke the system was told to be careful. But careful kills kingdoms before they're born. Careful never stormed a beach, started a revolution, or carved greatness into the bones of time. You've been conditioned to avoid pain at all costs. But hear me now, pain is not the enemy, comfort is. Pain refines, pain reveals, pain is the language of growth, and without it, you rot. Look around, men drowning in luxury but starving for purpose. Men who've never been punched, never failed hard, never risked everything for something real. And what do they call that? Success. No, that's surrender. You want to live? Then seek the edge. Chase the version of yourself hiding just beyond fear. Because that's where the real man waits. Not in the safety net, but on the tightrope above it. You weren't built to coast. You were built to climb, bleed, conquer, collapse, and rise again. Not because it's easy, but because you can. And the day you trade comfort for conquest is the day you stop existing and start becoming. The school system was never built to awaken your genius. It was built to break it, to grind the fire out of boys and turn them into obedient, clock-punching men. Not thinkers, not warriors, not builders, just parts. Replaceable, silent, tame. The origin of modern schooling wasn't about education, it was about industrialization. In the 1800s, Prussia created a system to produce factory workers and compliant soldiers, men who followed orders, respected bells, and never questioned authority. That model spread to the Western world like wildfire. And you were born into it. Think about it. Why are schools structured like factories? Rows of desks, standardized tests, obedience rewarded, creativity punished. Why is the bell the symbol of transition, not curiosity? Because it's not about learning, it's about programming. From the age of 5, they begin the slow disconnection from your body, from your instincts, from your ability to say, "This doesn't feel right." They teach you what to think, not how. They reward regurgitation, not rebellion. And by the time you reach adulthood, you've forgotten how to question. You think this is just a flaw in the system. It's the design. Because a man who still hears his inner voice is dangerous to a machine that runs on compliance. So what happens? The boy who dreamed in symbols becomes the man who fears his own thoughts. The boy who wanted to build empires settles for climbing corporate ladders. The boy who asked why over and over learns to stay silent just to survive. But that part of you, that defiant spark, it's not gone, it's buried. And now, it's time to dig it out. You must unlearn to remember. Remember the hunger. Remember the clarity. Remember that you were never meant to ask for permission to live. You want motivation? Burn the textbook. Reignite your instincts. Study yourself like a weapon and learn from the field, not the cage. Because your mission doesn't require a degree. It requires ownership. They don't just want your time. They don't just want your money. They want your soul's allegiance. That quiet inner agreement where you stop asking questions and start obeying without even realizing it. This is where the game turns spiritual. You thought it was just culture? Just trends? No. This is ritual-level manipulation. The kind that's been passed down through bloodlines, secret societies, and unbroken chains of command for thousands of years. Let me show you how deep this goes. Every institution that's ever claimed moral authority over you, whether it wears a robe, a badge, a diploma, or a crown, has operated on one simple principle. Give us your trust, and we'll give you identity. That's the trade. Your fire for their framework, your soul's instinct for their pre-approved roles. Churches replaced connection with confession. Governments replaced purpose with patriotism. Schools replaced vision with curriculum. And every time you questioned it, they responded the same way. Who are you to challenge the system? But here's the truth they fear. You were born with a compass they can't manufacture. An inner knowing that doesn't need doctrine, data, or dogma. And when that compass activates, when you start listening to the still, savage voice inside, you begin to see it all. The fake charities laundering power, the broken politicians reading scripts, the corporate campaigns dressed as morality. All of it, a puppet show for the obedient. They use fear to summon your loyalty. They use guilt to keep you quiet. They weaponize your goodness against you. Because a man who feels too much without seeing clearly becomes easy to lead, straight off the cliff. But that ends here. Your allegiance does not belong to systems. It belongs to your mission, your creator, your code. You must become the kind of man who bows to no flag, no trend, no movement, unless it aligns with your soul's authority. And once you do that, once your allegiance is internal, unshakable, sacred, you become ungovernable. Not in rebellion, but in clarity. Entertainment is not harmless. It's not just a way to relax or have fun. It is, and always has been, a ritual weapon of empires. The Romans called it panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Feed the masses, dazzle them with games, keep them fed and entertained, so they never revolt. Sound familiar? You're not watching TV. You're being watched by systems that learn your mind. You're not consuming content. You're being consumed, minute by minute, belief by belief. You think that superhero movie was just fiction? No. It was psychological seduction. Every frame, every arc, every character, crafted to rewrite your understanding of what a man is and what he isn't. And here's what they've done brilliantly. They made the hero weak, emotionally unstable, apologetic, passive. They made the villain powerful, commanding, bold, but twisted. So now, when you feel your inner fire ignite, you question it. Am I the bad guy for wanting power? No, you're just waking up, and they're afraid of that. It's not just movies. It's the endless stream of reality TV, TikToks, soft porn disguised as dance trends, video games that reward dopamine but never discipline. All designed to keep you busy, but never dangerous. Look closer. Why is every male character either a clown, a coward, or a broken man in need of redemption? Why is every show soaked in sarcasm, shame, and emasculation? Why are strength, brotherhood, and order always portrayed as a threat? Because true masculine power, when awakened, is unprogrammable, and they can't afford that. So they've engineered a digital drug, Entertainment that simulates purpose, replaces meaning with stimulation, and convinces you that sitting still, scrolling endlessly, is somehow living. It's not. It's death on autoplay. But you can break it. How? By starving the parasite. Turn it off. Step away. Reclaim your boredom. Let your mind get quiet enough to remember your mission. Because here's the truth. A man who is easily entertained will never build a kingdom. They've been neutering men in plain sight, not with chains, not with prisons, but with narratives. You've heard them. Masculinity is toxic. Men need to soften. Strong is scary. Gentle is safe. Let me tell you what's really happening. This is a war. A psychological operation, a long, calculated campaign to sterilize your fire, because a man connected to his primal core is uncontrollable. They've taken the sacred force that built pyramids, forged steel, and stormed beaches, and rebranded it as a problem, as something to medicate, as something to repress. From the classroom to the corporate cubicle, they've engineered an environment hostile to testosterone, to aggression, to fire. Sit still. Be nice. Don't interrupt. Don't fight. But inside every man is a storm. And when you suppress that storm, it doesn't disappear. It rots. And that rot shows up as depression, as anxiety, as addiction. Because you were never meant to be calm all the time. You were meant to fight, not to be violent, but to build, to protect, to challenge, to conquer. And if they can strip that from you, they don't need to kill you, because you're already dead. Look at the stats. They don't want to explain. Testosterone levels have dropped nearly 40% in the last 50 years. Sperm counts are collapsing. Mental health issues are exploding. You think that's coincidence? They've poisoned the water, flooded the food with estrogenic compounds, replaced physical initiation with emotional confusion. And any man who resists? They call him dangerous. Good. Be dangerous. Because the world does not get better when men become weaker. It gets better when men become wiser, stronger, and more aligned with who they truly are. Your fire was never the problem. Your disconnection from it was. You want to rise? Then reclaim your edge. Lift heavy. Speak with fire. Move with intent. Let your presence disrupt the room. You're not here to apologize for your strength. You're here to master it and wield it with precision. Because when a man remembers who he truly is, the world trembles. They sold you a lie, a polished, popular, seductive lie. Balance is the key to life. Moderation in all things. Don't push too hard. Don't go too far. Stay centered. Stay safe. But here's the truth no one dares to say. Balance is for men who don't want to be great. Show me one empire, one dynasty, one immortal name, built by a man who lived in moderation. Alexander didn't conquer half the known world by taking rest days. Tesla didn't die penniless because he had work-life balance. Goggins didn't rewrite human limits by being gentle with himself. Obsession is not a flaw, it's the fuel of transformation. But they fear obsession. Because obsessed men are unpredictable. You can't manipulate a man who's possessed by purpose. You can't distract him with sex, sales, or screens. He's locked in, dialed, lasered. So they gave you a false idol, the balanced man, the man who does a little bit of everything, but masters nothing. He's agreeable. He's inoffensive. He never burns too hot. And that's why no one remembers his name. Let me be clear. Balance is useful, once you've won. Balance is a luxury for kings, not the currency of the hungry. You want to rise? Then imbalance is your crucible. Your diet must be disciplined. Your time must be militant. Your circle must be ruthlessly filtered. You must tip the scale. Devote yourself with unreasonable intensity until your very presence bends reality. This doesn't mean burnout. This means clarity. It means cutting off mediocrity like a tumor. It means treating your time like blood. It means sacrificing what they call normal to become what they call impossible. Because the truth is, the modern world is designed to soften you, to make you average, to sell you moderation as virtue, so they don't have to compete with the real version of you. But you're not here for average. You're here to become the man they can't ignore. The one who doesn't blend in, because he burns through the fabric of this world. You want balance? Earn it. After you've built the foundation in fire, attention is the true throne, not money, not muscles, not followers. If they can control where you look, they can control what you see. And if they control what you see, they control who you become. They've built an empire on distraction, and your attention is the fuel. The ancient kings knew this. That's why they built monuments taller than the trees, why they bathed their thrones in gold, why priests wore colors reserved for royalty. Not because they needed to, but because they knew you'd look. Today, they don't need temples. They have algorithms. They've made your phone a cathedral of seduction, infinite scrolling, infinite stimulation, but never satisfaction. You think you're choosing what to watch. No, you're being guided. Your focus, sliced into fragments and fed back to you with sugar on top. Every second you spend locked in that loop, you grow more passive, more programmable. And here's the worst part. They've trained you to reward them for it. You pay them with clicks, with time, with energy, to rob you of the one thing that separates a king from a slave. Voluntary focus. What you focus on becomes your reality, your beliefs, your habits, your future. So the question is simple, brother. Who owns your mind? Do you control your attention like a blade? Or is it being pulled like a leash? Because until you master this, until you seize your focus and aim it with precision, you are not free. You are a machine, reacting, clicking, drifting. But I'll tell you a secret they don't want men to know. A focused man is a dangerous man. Why? Because when you direct your attention fully, not scattered, not split, but burning like a laser, you can break patterns in weeks that took years to install. You can rebuild your body, reshape your identity, rewrite your story, without asking for a single ounce of permission. This is your edge. This is you, a weapon. Not motivation, not hype. Mastery of attention. And the men who master it rule silently from the shadows. They didn't need chains. They didn't need whips to control a man fully. They only had to control the narrative inside his mind. You were trained before you could walk. Not by soldiers, by soft voices, smiling faces, authority wrapped in affection, parents, teachers, cartoons, Sunday sermons. They didn't teach you to think. They taught you to repeat. Sit still. Raise your hand. Say the right answer. Color inside the lines. Conform, and you'll be praised. Question, and you'll be isolated. By the time you were 7, your identity was not your own. You didn't choose your beliefs. They were installed. You were programmed to crave approval, to fear rejection more than death. Because in your mind, being rejected meant exile. Exile meant death. This is no accident. It's a psychological system older than currency. rooted in what's called social survival conditioning. Ancient tribes survived by unity. Outcasts didn't live long. So the brain evolved a reflex: obey the group, think like the tribe, or perish. But the modern world, it hijacked that wiring. Now the tribe is Twitter. The punishment is cancellation. The new fire pit isn't real, it's shame. You are being ruled by the part of your brain still afraid of exile, still terrified of standing alone, and they know it. That's why they don't need to censor you. They taught you to censor yourself. You feel it, that flicker of truth before you speak. And then the fear clamps down. What will they think? Will I be judged? Maybe I should stay silent. And just like that, you betray yourself again and again and again. But what if you didn't? What if you spoke anyway? What if you acted anyway? What if you became the kind of man who tells the truth even if his voice shakes? That man is unstoppable. Because when you kill the need for approval, you become something they can't control, a sovereign mind. And there's nothing more dangerous. It didn't start with smartphones. It didn't start with governments. The first act of mass control wasn't technological, it was spiritual. There was a moment in our ancient past, a moment erased, buried, ritualized into myth, when mankind was convinced to kneel, not to gods of thunder or fertility, but to gatekeepers. Before kings ruled men, priests did. Not the kind who pray, the kind who withhold. They discovered early on, knowledge is power, but only when you don't share it. So what did they do? They wrapped it in symbols, locked it in temples, and created a barrier between the divine and the common man. That was the original con. The lie that you need an intermediary to touch the infinite, that you are not worthy to know, that truth must be earned through obedience, sacrifice, and loyalty. And just like that, the fire inside men was redirected. From exploration to worship, from sovereignty to servitude. Think about it. Why is sacred knowledge always hidden in languages you don't speak? Latin, Hebrew, Sanskrit, coded geometry. Why are divine texts kept in vaults, while you're handed edited translations? Because if you knew what was behind the curtain, you'd never bow again. They turned enlightenment into a monopoly. And power? They sold it back to you, diluted, ritualized, weaponized. The Catholic Church once burned people alive for owning a Bible in their native tongue. Why? Because if you could read, you could question. And if you questioned, you could break free. But this pattern didn't end in the past, it evolved. Today, the gatekeepers wear lab coats. They speak in academic tongues. They dress their dogma in data. And if you question them, you're labeled anti-intellectual. But the game is the same. Trust us. You're too ignorant to decide for yourself. No. You were born with an ancient knowing, a fire they've spent centuries trying to extinguish, but that fire, it's still there. You feel it when you stare at the stars in silence. You feel it when you look in the mirror and know this life was meant for more. And that feeling, that's your inheritance. They stole your birthright of inner authority. Now you take it back. They want you predictable, easy to read, emotionally transparent. Because a man they can read is a man they can manipulate. But you must become unreadable, not fake, not numb, impenetrable. There's a reason they attack stoicism. There's a reason they call silence toxic. Because when a man controls his reaction, he controls the room. Look at every institution, religion, government, media. They don't rule through violence. They rule through emotion, fear, shame, outrage. If they can trigger your feelings, they can steer your life. And they've been triggering you since you could walk. Crying gets attention. Anger gets punished. Sadness gets medicated. So what happens? You grow up chasing permission to feel strong. You overexpose your soul in the name of vulnerability. And suddenly, your enemies know your pressure points better than you do. But power isn't found in leaking emotion, it's found in containing it, controlling it, choosing exactly when and how to release it, like a weapon, not a wound. Let me take you back to 15th century Japan. The samurai had a code, Fudoshin, the immovable mind. It meant being calm in chaos, still in fire, unshakable in betrayal. A man could have his family murdered in front of him and still execute vengeance without blinking. That wasn't coldness. It was sovereignty. You think that's too extreme? Look at your life. Every time you lash out, panic, overreact, you give someone else the steering wheel. You become a puppet, a man with strings you can't even see. But not you. Not anymore. From this moment forward, no one gets to pull your mind into chaos without earning it. Your presence must become a fortress. Your emotions, guarded gates, and your mission, untouchable. The modern world rewards noise, but men of substance train in silence. They watch, they listen, and when the time comes, they strike with precision. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them fear what you're planning. That mystery, that's power. They told you strength was loud, shouting in gyms, flashy watches, fast cars. But the strongest men in history moved in silence. Not because they were weak, but because they understood one law that separates the pawns from the kings. Power concealed is power multiplied. You were trained to broadcast every goal, every step, every win. They made you addicted to external validation, so that if no one applauded, you'd stop. That's not strength. That's slavery wearing a motivational t-shirt. Let me show you the deeper code. In ancient Babylon, there were schools beneath the ziggurats, forbidden academies where only the most dangerous minds were allowed. They were taught the doctrine of secrecy, the art of sacred isolation. Why? Because they understood that when a man reveals his mission too early, he invites sabotage from enemies, from so-called friends, and worst of all, from his own ego. Silence is not passivity, it's discipline. It's choosing to build in the dark, where distractions die and focus sharpens to a blade. That's what they don't want you to know. They want you to leak your plans, to waste your fire performing instead of transforming. Because as long as you're talking, you're not becoming. But you've started to become dangerous. You're watching, listening, feeling the weight of truths that don't fit in polite conversation. Good. That's how it begins. Now here's your next fracture. Your phone? It's a feedback loop. Every post, every comment, every like, training you to need an audience just to exist. Break that. You must become a closed circuit of power. Self-generating, self-validating, self-led. No applause, no likes, just war. War on the weak habits. War on the comfort addiction. War on the illusion that someone else's opinion defines your direction. You want to be unbreakable? Then train in silence. Build in silence. Winnie. Silence. And when the world finally sees you, it'll be too late to stop you. This is the path of the inner elite, the shadow few, the awakened men who don't need a crowd because they've already conquered themselves. We're not done. There's a reason they keep you exhausted. Endless alerts, shallow dopamine, junk food, empty noise. They don't fear your strength. They fear your stillness. Because in stillness, you remember. You remember that you were not born to follow, that you were not put on this earth to sit in traffic, pay bills and die politely. You were carved from chaos, built to conquer, not others, but yourself. But they rewired that instinct. They took the predator and caged him in routine, told him that passion is dangerous, that ambition is toxic, that submission is noble, and you believed it. You became tame. You became manageable. And worst of all, you became bored. But boredom is not laziness. Boredom is the death cry of the warrior inside you, the part that knows he was meant to hunt, to build, to protect, to bleed for something real. They've removed the initiation. No trial, no rite, just passive consumption from cradle to grave. But the ancients knew better. In Sparta, a boy was thrown into the wild to earn manhood. In Norse lands, he stood alone under the stars, waiting for the gods to whisper his name. In Africa, he walked into the forest and did not return until the boy had died, and the man had risen. Where is your right? They took it from you, replaced it with university debt, HR policies and pills, but you don't need their permission to reclaim it. You must create your own crucible. Starve the weakness, kill the victim, abandon the version of you that waited for approval. You want motivation? Then face this truth. You are the only one coming to save you. No mentor, no government, no miracle. You will build yourself in darkness, with blood, with discipline, with silence. And when you rise, they will call you ruthless. Let them, because the man who bows to no one terrifies the world built to enslave him. Now, if you're still with me, if your blood is sent, starting to burn, I want you to comment this phrase twice below. I destroy the old me. I destroy the old me. That is your oath. That is your line in the sand. Say it. Mean it. Because the descent only deepens from here. They will call you crazy. They must. Because if they validated what you're starting to feel, the entire structure would collapse. The job market, the school system, the military-industrial trance. All of it built on a single lie, that your purpose is to serve something outside of yourself. But here's what they don't tell you. Every system is a siphon. It extracts energy, time, belief, masculine fire, and repackages it as duty. You're told to be a good man. But a good man, in their eyes, is a tamed one. Not wild, not sovereign, predictable, contained, politely dying. And the wild ones, they were always hunted. Spartacus, dead. Giordano Bruno, burned. Malcolm X, silenced. Why? Because they broke programming. Because they saw past the curtain and refused to kneel. Let me tell you something few dare to admit. Your mind is not fully your own. It was carved. From birth, institutions downloaded frameworks into your consciousness. What to want, what to fear, what not to question. Your dreams aren't even yours. You were told to want money, but not power. Status, but not sovereignty. Peace, but not freedom. They inverted the masculine, made you ashamed of your aggression, afraid of your dominance, silent about your fire. Because a man who remembers his fire can't be owned. Look around. See the sedation. Most men are just ghosts, animated by caffeine, porn, processed food, and dopamine loops. They've been taught to kill time, not use it. To chase pleasure, not purpose. But you're still listening. That means something inside you survived the programming. A whisper, a burn, a refusal to kneel. Good, because now we go deeper. You're not here to fit in, you're here to fracture the matrix. And it begins with war, internal, brutal, sacred. You must dismantle every belief that was installed, not chosen. Burn the blueprint, crack the mirror, refuse the identity they gave you. Because only when you are empty of their voices can you hear the one voice that matters, your own. You're not just a man, you're a sovereign system, a weapon they could never control, if awakened. So awaken. They trained you to fear the dark, to flinch when the lights go out, to associate shadow with danger. But the greatest prison ever built was daylight. Because in the light, everything is seen, but only what they allow you to see. You think darkness is your enemy? No, brother. It's your birthright, your forge, your origin. Every great transformation begins in the dark. The seed is buried. The lion grows in silence. And the man who wakes up does so alone, in black, in pain, in exile. Not in comfort. That's why they fear the darkness. Because it's where men remember, where the programming cracks, where the masks fall. Let me show you something most men will never understand. In 1307, on a Friday the 13th, the Templars were hunted, slaughtered, erased. Why? Because they had seen the machine behind the Vatican. Because they began to question the ritual. Because they discovered a vault beneath Solomon's temple not filled with gold, but with scrolls. Writings that exposed the blueprint of empire control, mass initiation, emotional hypnosis, fear-based obedience wrapped in holy robes. The ones who read them didn't want wealth. They wanted liberation. And for that, they had to be annihilated. You still think you're free? Look around. Your gods wear suits now. Your temples are banks, and your priests speak through teleprompters. You worship comfort, security, likes. But deep inside, you know, that hollow echo when the noise dies down, that void you try to drown with dopamine, it's not depression. It's the soul screaming for war. Not war on the world, war on the system inside you, the fake self you were taught to protect. Because if you knew what you were really capable of, every lie would burn, every mask would melt, and every force that profits off your sleep would crumble. You don't need permission to rise, you need the rage to break the Masculinity chains. So here's your first truth. Say it out loud. I was not born to obey. Now say it again, and let your voice tremble with power. This is the path of the awakened. And we've just begun. They say history is written by the victors. That's a lie. It's written by the architects, the ones who never step onto the battlefield but decide who lives and who vanishes. Men with no nation, no face, no allegiance, just a single generational obsession: control. You think motivation is about mindset? No. Mindset is the last line of defense against programming, because long before you ever read a book, lifted a weight, or set a goal, you were indoctrinated through symbols, through rituals, through repetition. Why do you think school bells mimic factory shifts? Why is the Pledge of Allegiance drilled into your lungs before your brain is even capable of questioning? Because control begins with rhythm, pattern. Repetition makes obedience feel like identity. And the most brilliant part? They made you crave it. You think you want the house, the job, the title, but those aren't your dreams. They're cages, wrapped in prestige. A leash woven in gold is still a leash. Now listen closely. The ancient world had a term for this kind of psychological manipulation. Psychotropeia, the shaping of souls through unseen pressure. The Greeks used it in theaters, the Romans used it in temples. But today, it's weaponized through your screen. 60 frames per second, algorithmically targeted to your weakest instincts. Every scroll, every like, every ad, it's not accidental. And what happens when you try to escape? You're labeled rebellious, toxic, problematic. But here's the truth, they never say out loud. Every empire is built on the backs of men who don't question. Every awakening begins with the one who does. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when your soul recoils from the 9-to-5 graveyard, from the clickbait wisdom, from the culture of sedation. That's your spirit remembering who you were before they put a name on you, before they caged your fire in a beard, a certificate, and told you what kind of man you were allowed to be. But this is the turning. This is where the ordinary man collapses and the dangerous one emerges. You are not here to be liked. You are here to become unstoppable. The rabbit hole is open, and now you must choose. Go back to sleep, or keep listening, and never be the same again. They silenced him before the sun came up, nailed his tongue to a board and buried the body behind a church no one speaks of anymore. All because he saw something. In the archives beneath Rome, etched in parchment older than Christ. A map, not of land, of control. You weren't meant to hear this. You were meant to scroll past, forget, obey, and die without ever knowing who was holding the strings. But now, you're here. And once you hear this, you don't go back. They taught you motivation was about smiling, grinding, chasing a dream. No, that's the version built for livestock, for men too domesticated to rebel. True motivation is born in the dark, forged in the caverns of forbidden truth. The hunger you feel, it's not for success, it's for sovereignty. Understand this. Every empire, every church, every government you've ever bowed your head to, they were built not to raise you, but to harness you. From the moment you were born, they fed you a language, a morality, a rhythm of life. All scripted by dead men who needed obedient sons, not dangerous ones. History isn't a tale of progress. It's a machine of memory manipulation. You were taught to believe Rome was the cradle of civilization. But did you know what they did before every expansion? They erased the names of every man who opposed them, not just killed them, obliterated their memory. Because once a man's name is forgotten, his rebellion never happened. We're still living in that machine. Social media is just a prettier coliseum. News cycles are digital sermons, and every app on your phone, a leash in your pocket. But you felt it, didn't you? That quiet voice that says, something's wrong. That cold instinct that says, you were built for more. They call it discontent. I call it the awakening. And if you're still here, if you haven't clicked away, then you're not like them. You were meant to deeze, and to see what was never meant to be seen, to remember what was erased, and to become the kind of man they fear. Because this story, it's not just history, it's your resurrection.